Good evening. Welcome to UChicago's Networking Night, Alumni in Education, where our guiding principles will be to connect, grow, pivot, and discuss the many intersections that our career paths can take with the world of education. We're going to start us off with an opening thought from the founder of the UChicago Lab School, John Dewey. Education is a social process. Education is growth. Education is not preparation for life, but is life itself. Our many alumni have gone on to show how education is not preparation for professional life, but is professional life itself. I'm Josh Levitt. I'm a college alumnus, class of 2010, and I work in the UChicago Alumni office. My responsibility is to create career development programs to help you engage in lifelong learning and advance in your own careers. I'm delighted to be joined tonight by other alumni who have made their own, who forged their own paths within this multifaceted field. We're joined by Qian Deng, who is in the Booth School, and she's the co-founder of the EdTech company together.science. We're also joined by Dr. Wong, a college alumnus, who is the manager of the Keep Improving District Services, or KIDS program for the Chicago Public Schools, and Adria Peery, who is in the Reynolds Club as an assistant director of event management. So we are going to hear from them and their thoughts on John Dewey's concept and how they have forged their paths in education. We will also hear from Executive Director Extraordinaire, Lauren Henry.
Is that my cue, Josh?
Yes, that's your cue.
All right. So thank you so much, Josh, for the introduction. I want to welcome everyone. I'm Lauren Henry. I'm the new 4 months in executive director of UChicago Alumni. I am a college alum. Can I believe we're classmates 2005? So good for us. I'm realizing that I should be putting my college class year in my Zoom name, so the things you learn when you're in a new job. But I'm so excited to be here with you all tonight. Hard as it may be to believe, or like easy as it may be to believe, I think for many of you, I never said when I grow up, like I want to work in higher education and work in alumni engagement. But somewhere between my Metcalf internship with the Chicago Symphony and my work in the college programming office and in career advancement, I kind of meandered through the nonprofit world, ended up at Penn, got my master's in higher education, and really have been developing a bit of a niche career in higher education, which has a really deep meaning for me and now has led me back to where my career started on campus, which I keep telling people you've not felt grown up until you've had headshots on the quads. That was really a moment. So as executive director of UChicago Alumni and as an alum, I'm committed to making sure that our alumni experience is as unique and transformative as the education that we received. And want to make sure it's mutually beneficial to alumni, to the incredible students following in our footsteps who are going to be here on campus in just a matter of weeks, and to our amazing university. And I see these opportunities for professional development and career advancement as really pivotal to the work that UChicago Alumni does in support of all of you and our fellow Maroons. So that is why I am so energized and excited to be here with you all in Zoom tonight to just see the incredible variety of alumni who have shown up to explore careers across a broad field of education. And as Josh said, I mean, our panelists illustrate that education is so multidisciplinary and really calls for the kind of multifaceted and multi-talented individuals and thinkers that the university is so fantastic at creating. I want to give special thanks to Qian, to Adria, and to Ken for sharing their perspectives with us. I'm going to encourage you all, though I think this probably goes without saying for University of Chicago audience, that you should ask questions of our panelists, of each other, of yourselves. I always remind Chicago alumni audiences that raising your voice at the end of a statement does not a question make. But I really encourage you to get in the conversation, make connections, have ambitious conversations about your ambitions, and enjoy this opportunity to network with our amazing community. And most importantly, I'm going to let you get to the panel, but I really hope that you come away from this evening knowing that the University of UChicago is not just a school that you graduated from, but a community that's you're always a part of, and it's always a part of you. So thank you, Josh, for having me. Thank you again for the panelists. And yeah, it's great to be here.
Thank you, Lauren. I feel exactly that same way. And my own career in the education field likewise began on campus. I worked in the neighborhood schools program as a literacy aide at Ray Elementary School in Hyde Park, and went on ultimately to continue that work in elementary schools. But then over the course of my own graduate career in American literature, ended up teaching community college, four-year college students, and now likewise a return home to my intellectual home at the University of Chicago. So thank you, absolutely. Without further ado, I would like to turn things over to our panelists. I will ask them to share their journeys. How did each of you get into education? And to kick things off, I'm going to launch a fun poll for everyone here. Who is your favorite fictional teacher? Each one brings a certain personality and pedagogy to popular culture. I'm going to launch that. Take a look. We have Jaime Escalante from Stand and Deliver, John Keating from Dead Poet Society, Luann Johnson from Dangerous Minds, George Feeney from Boy Meets World, Valerie Frizzle from the Magic School Bus, Vivian Banks from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Dewey Finn from School of Rock, and of course, Minerva McGonagall or other. Feel free to answer that. And we'll go through our panel. Tell us how you got into education, and were any of these fictional teachers inspirations for you? Let's start with Qian. Tell us about your journey and your favorite fictional teacher.
All right. Yeah, so I'm Qian. You can also call me Kathy. I am currently a co-founder at Together.science, but my journey to education was actually pretty nonlinear, because when I was growing up, both my parents were educators, and I had a lot of influential educators in my life. So I always really wanted to be a teacher. And then over time, I realized I did not have what it took to be a good teacher. So eventually I became a data scientist, and actually was sort of an educator in the sense that I was building machine learning models. And at least in the field of work that I was in, you can't really just deploy models and have that be the end, right? So I really witnessed how machine learning gone wrong can really be simply replacing jobs and resulting in layoffs and things like that. But actually, if you do it in the right way and you really educate people in how do you combine their personal sort of human ingenuity with the power of machine learning, that really allows us to tap into so much more. And so that's how I really started to think about, okay, I actually could get into education again simply by harnessing the power of technology. And then started thinking about, well, if I were in the education world, how would I do that on a larger scale? And that was when I also met my co-founder for Together.science, who honestly had the idea around, how do we use the tools of technology to improve STEM learning for the next billion students. And as classmates, we actually founded our startup, and were able to recruit sort of additional co-founders as well. And so yeah, that's how I ended up being in education, despite really loving my role in data science. And eventually we were able to launch our startup here at UChicago through the Social New Venture Challenge, and met a lot of really great mentors along the way. So that's been a great journey. And then favorite fictional teacher, I think, is actually Professor Moriarty from the Sherlock Holmes stories.
Oh.
So favorite is not exactly, but I really do like how he has this day job of being a professor, but then also is the head of a network of crime as well. And how better to recruit people for your crime network other than sort of being their educators. So yeah.
That was a very creative answer. I hear you. I hear you on that. Thank you. Adria, tell us how you got into the field of education. Thank you also for all you do at the Reynolds Club. Any happy
Yeah,
memories there of
I
concerts and performances and so on.
yes. So my journey in education is one that that I have found is not as common in student affairs, and that I got into higher education and was inspired to do it partially because I did not have the best college experience. I love UChicago and I am very proud to be an alum. I'm very proud of the work that I've done. I'm very proud of the intellectual community that I'm a part of. But when I arrived on campus, UChicago was still struggling to find, and in many ways still is, to find its footing with respect to low income, first generation, and underrepresented minority students. So it was really being on campus and feeling like I didn't have the resources that I needed to be successful, and wanting to be a part of the solution to see somebody from my background in 20 years coming to UChicago and having a much smoother journey than I did. I started, like, what really sparked my idea that education was something you could get into and change was actually a student job that I had working at the Graham School during my fourth year of college, and just seeing the inner workings of what it takes to get a academic program off the ground and the supports that could be made available for students was really energizing for me. I started my time in higher ed actually volunteering as an AmeriCorps Vista after college with the Illinois Campus Compact. And from there, kind of started my journey as an advisor. I went to grad school because, like a good UChicago student, I'm like, I've seen how this works in practice. How does it work in theory?
Oh yeah.
So I'm definitely one of those people that believes that the truth exists at the intersection of practice and theory, and learning the theories and about higher education and college student development was really important to me, so that I could be in a position to innovate and assess and evaluate and really bring forth the student success that we all want to see on college campuses today, considering how important higher education is to really leading a fulfilling professional life in many cases, especially when it comes to things like social mobility. And right now I'm just kind of mid-career, trying to find my forever home within higher education, while at the same time falling deeply in love with UChicago students again every day, getting to work with them planning events for RSOs and large campus traditions has been particularly rewarding. And I guess I prepared for this question and I was really excited about it. My favorite fictional teacher is Miss Grotke from Recess, the cartoon.
Yes.
That was from the 90s. She was just trying to raise little revolutionaries. Like, she was just always spitting truth. And I aspire to be that kind of educator, somebody who encourages students to think for themselves and challenge power structures. So I just loved her back then, and I still love her today. She makes even more sense the older I get.
Fantastic. That is another terrific answer to that question. All right, Dr. Wong, tell us how did you come to manage the Keep Improving District Services program?
All right. So I think a common theme might be, just nonlinear journeys. So when I got to college, I had no interest in being in the education space. It just wasn't anything that was on my radar, because all I knew in education was we had teachers, we had principals, and I didn't want to do either one. I didn't like being in front of a classroom. I didn't like giving presentations or talking in front of a group of any sort. So it just didn't make sense for me to teach at all. But it really got sparked when my RA in my dorm told me about the Young Scholars Program that the math department does in partnership with Chicago Public Schools. So like kids come in from CPS on Saturday mornings to learn about math. They voluntarily come in. And I just thought it was really awesome that we had kids who were coming in on Saturdays to learn about math. And they were really excited about it. And I know that a lot of kids growing up don't like math. So that was really just fun, a little introduction just to working with kids and just being in an instructor sort of role. So I was a teaching assistant, I did some tutoring work, and I knew like part of me wanted to eventually become a teacher. Like I just really loved working with students and helping them understand things, and just teachers often talk about that aha moment where everything just suddenly clicks, and it's pretty awesome when that happens. So I knew I wanted to teach, but as a UChicago graduate, I also liked research and working like theory and all of that. So I was like, let's look at academia. That's a nice little combination of the two. Like I get to teach classes and then do some research. So I went down that path, and then near the end of my program, so that was in economics, and near the end, I found that I didn't like the research part as much. I really liked the teaching part a lot more. I felt like I could have much more of an impact teaching than I could doing research. So that was where I made more of a conscious shift back towards teaching. So I ultimately taught adult education at a vocational school. So it was pretty like basic mathematics, arithmetic, things like that. And that was one of the more challenging, but also most rewarding experiences of my life, because these were people who had gone, 20 plus years, their entire lives, just not liking math, not really knowing how to do it. And suddenly, just being able to help them see that that was not the case, that they could do it, and that it wasn't as daunting as they thought it was. Like that was just really rewarding. So I was on the teaching path, and I found that this was a really great path for me. It was rewarding, but the challenge was, I had this class of about 20 students every single term. Maybe sometimes I had 2 classes, but I was really only impacting a smaller group of people every 3-6 months. So the question was, what else could I do that might have more of a larger impact? And through a program at Education Pioneers, I was placed at Chicago Public Schools in the procurement department, where I currently am. So I came in as a summer fellow. I helped work on the transportation strategy for the department / the district. I eventually moved into a data analyst role within the procurement department. And within that role was a lot of data work, but I also started looking at some of the different processes that we were working on and finding ways to just make them run a little bit better. And, as an economist, making things more efficient really seemed to be in my wheelhouse. So over time, I just started taking on more of that work, and that's how I landed in my current role, where I manage the continuous improvement program, acronamed KIDS, for the procurement department at CPS. And favorite teacher, Indiana Jones. So the college professor, kind of boring tweed jacket, but then on the off time, he's running around the world on these adventures with giant boulders and people chasing him, things like that. So
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's kind of as Dr. Wong suggested, like perhaps like the common thread is that non-linear path, and that's perfectly okay. That we don't need necessarily to do one thing that leads to the next thing that leads to the next thing in that straightforward fashion, but that journey can take its winding paths. Nonetheless, it seems like all 3 of you had some like set of guiding principles, some set of guiding skills that you wanted to cultivate, or perhaps found that you didn't necessarily want to cultivate over the course of your career. So I'm just curious, with respect to, pivoting into and out out from education, like what are some of the lessons you've learned? What are some of the tips and best practices that our fellow alumni can bring to their own reflections on their professions? So let's start. Yeah, how about Adria?
Yeah, I feel like you can you can do a lot in education if you come to it from a place of appreciating the power of it. I personally I I am a big evangelizer of the transformative power of education. I know that my life would look a lot different if I had not had access to a college education, much less a college education of this caliber. And really taking stock of that and the benefits that I've had from it, and having the desire to give back all of the gifts that I have received, and give back better than I have received, and to innovate and find you don't do education for the money, although we should all be paid better. You do it for the mission. You do it because you want to help engage with someone during a critical time in their life where they're seeking to grow and develop. And I think that if you come to it with that, any type of pivoting in or out makes sense if you have a clear set of values when it comes to education and the power that it can have and the way that it can be transformative for not just individuals, but entire communities.
Thank you so much. How about Ken? What have you learned over the course of your various pivots? What sort of tips, best practices, guiding principles have you found most energizing for you?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing, just from a practical perspective, is just knowing what your skill sets are and then how they can be applied to whatever new role you're looking at. So, my background in college was math and economics. So I was very good at like working with data. So that was a path that I could go on. So it wasn't as hard of a pivot moving from, like academia to being a data analyst. And being in the classroom, like those are still experiences, or sorry, skill sets that you can learn through other, positions. It's a lot of communication, being able to explain things in certain ways to different people. In a classroom, it's, students that are younger than you. In the workplace, it's people who are older or younger than you. It's being able to be organized and have, like project timelines and being able to, stay on track with all of that. So I think just a lot of the skill sets you might develop in like a non-education job are easily transferable to an education job, or also vice versa. Like if you are in a classroom and you know how to teach, and you have that experience, then that's also very transferable to working in office setting with other people that you have to work with on a team or a project.
Fantastic. All right. So Adria's using values as that lodestar. Ken is using skill sets. Qian, how have you been able to pivot into EdTech?
Yeah, so I have kind of two thoughts on this. One of them is probably the biggest reason that I decided not to be a teacher is I felt like I didn't have anything that others would want to learn. Like I didn't feel qualified to be somebody else's teacher. And so what I realized more recently was I didn't have to be the one necessarily teaching others. I could play the role of finding voices that are really powerful and valuable, right? And supporting and amplifying those voices, whether it was through technology or through skills that I had developed in my last role. And so I realized, well, technology sort of by definition sort of does that, but then also sort of on the practical side of things, the way that Together Science came together for us was kind of by just having conversations. So my booth MBA is actually my second master's degree, and on sort of our last day of my previous master's degree at UC Berkeley, sort of we all got together on our last days and talked about, what did everyone want to do after graduating? And one of my classmates said, hey, like I am going to found a startup that improves the quality of STEM education, right? And sort of I reached out and said, hey, can we have more conversations about this? And over time, we kind of realized like, yes, we have actually really compatible skill sets. We were both super passionate about what we were doing, and let's just like build this thing together, right? And I honestly like didn't even believe that I had anything to contribute again, and I kind of was like, honestly, I'll be your unpaid intern. But actually, like I became a co-founder, and I do think that I have sort of earned that role through different kinds of value that I've added throughout the journey, whether it was through being in the Social New Venture Challenge and sort of being being the one pitching during the competition, and ultimately winning the $75,000. But then also like one of the biggest tools that maybe some of you haven't used yet is actually like just doing something like the MBA degree, right? Because that is one way to sort of hit that reset button on your career, and actually to meet such a large community of others who are also in a moment where they're pivoting, whether into education or something else. And one thing I found really valuable is just to like, again, have conversations about what do you care about? What are some things within education that you want to change, and how would you go about it? And actually actively recruiting others who sort of had similar beliefs or had skill sets that were complementary to our own. And yeah, I think that's honestly one of the most valuable things so far, sort of getting additional inspiration from others around me, and sort of by myself talking about it more, that sort of gave me the courage to keep going with this career path, even though it's relatively uncertain relative to a stable job. So yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that kind of paradigm shift. It's not just a matter of being receptive, but also of being vocal about your path that can help kind of clarify how you'll translate your skills from one to another, or how you'll continue to pursue a set of values in your profession. So really appreciate that. Now, perhaps our most famous alumna in the field of education was MacArthur Genius Grant recipient and UChicago Lab School teacher Vivian Paley. And one of her most famous books, You Can't Say, You Can't Play, she tackles the challenge of how students at the elementary school level, how they socialize, how they create in-groups and out-groups, and her experimental rule that she used to challenge this a dynamic of cliques and exclusions is you can't say you can't play. And how will that shift the dynamics for both for any sort of child who may be unwanted in a group, whether they're disruptive or whether they're just not fitting in. The point is, she takes this experimental approach to this big challenge. And so my sort of question to you, as many alumni in this field have followed in similar footsteps, what is a major challenge that you have encountered in your work so far, professionally, operationally, or otherwise? And what sort of perhaps experimental approach have you taken as education professionals? So let's see, who will I subject to call on first? How about Ken within procurement for Chicago Public Schools?
Yeah, sure. So operationally, Chicago Public Schools is a very large organization. We have 500 plus schools. I lose track of the number of employees, but up tens of thousands. And we have almost or over 300,000 students across the district. So it's a pretty big entity. So there are a lot of people involved. There are a lot of processes, and the challenge that we've been facing is a lot of our processes have been manual or really just manual and not automated in any sort of way. So a lot of the time, if someone requests something, they may not know where that request is, if it's routing to other different people. Like, if someone asks me something and I have to ask someone else for an answer, no one knows if I'm asking someone else. It just looks like, someone's been waiting for me to respond for 10 days. So the big thing that we've been working on is putting in place like systems where we can track all of the different processes. So if we want to bring on a vendor to CPS to do business, we have a process for that, and we started to create dashboards and reports. We can see where a certain vendor is in that process. And like every month we have a board that meets every month, and they review and approve different agenda items. And we have reports that track every single item that's going to board, what the status is on each item, what's missing, what questions are there, so that there's a lot more visibility and transparency into what's going on. So those are some of the things that we've worked on so far, but there's still a lot more other ones that it's just we're still working on tackling them. But and so it's systems and processes that are old, but also systems and processes that involve a lot of people. So that involves a lot of training and working with your end stakeholders, which in our case is mostly schools. So it's like clerks, principals, teachers, and how do we get them on board with the changes that we're making? It can't just be we tell you what to do because it's the best thing to do. It has to be the best thing given the environment that they're in. So that kind of leads into my response to the other question, which is our approach has been to do little pilot programs of different changes and things like that. So we have a little group of principals that we work with. We pilot new things with them, like here's this thing we're working on. Let us know what you think about it. Does it work? Does it not work? What changes do we need to make? And then based on that, we do a larger rollout across the district. So that's been a huge help for us, just so we have a good sounding board of schools, and they're geographically spread out across the city. So it's not just north side schools or anything like that. So we get representation across the entire city and the district. So we think that helps us get a better sense of what works for our customers, which are students, teachers, school staff.
Right. This is all the infrastructure that helps make things happen at these schools. It sounds like there's just a lot of opportunity for people who think about organizations operationally in that way, and how things exactly get done. Thank you. That's as you said, so a large school system, so it's a major challenge. a lot of moving pieces for sure. Thank you. And Qian.
I think the biggest challenge that we have currently is honestly like a really good problem to have, which is after the publicity that we've gotten from the Social Venture Challenge, what we found is that there's been this like huge outpouring of just people reaching out and saying, hey, we're really interested in your product. Like we literally hadn't realized there was such a huge demand for a good solution to the problem that we were solving. And so, we have this large wait list of customers that really want to get their hands on our products. And so the challenge is, well, how do we balance between having something that people will try and not just like leave and, never visit it again, but then also keep using it and keep sort of developing good habits and improving, that their math, studying habits and things like that, right? And how do we balance that against, having a limited time, having like a limited window where we have this amount of interest and traction with how many sort of actual developers that we currently have as a team. And so, yeah, actually, honestly, the solution is really similar to Qian's, where we've just sort of partitioned out the people that have reached out to us into sort of different focus groups, right? And sort of started with, let's find different kinds of stakeholders within our potential customer base and run initial trials with them within sort of the groups that we're we're pretty confident that they're willing to give us feedback when the product is still in a not fully finished state. and to be able to then iterate really quickly and implement what we're hearing from their feedback, so that when we do our bigger sort of more public launch, we'll have a product that we're pretty confident is actually ready after sort of doing those initial pilots. So yeah, that's kind of what we're planning right now. So it's funny that a completely different problem has a very similar solution.
Yes, and I noticed one of the games for STEM learning at Together Science is Whack-A-Math. And so I imagine that even like conceiving of different ways to gamify learning in that online, in that online space, it presents its own, set of challenges and little like moments to experiment with what works and what doesn't, or what could work better and so on. Yeah, thank you. Adria, yeah, tell us, yeah, challenge that you're tackling.
Yeah, so one of the things that we are starting to recognize in higher education is that there are a lot of students who deal with food insecurity while matriculating through our college campuses, both at the undergraduate and graduate and professional level. And there are peer institutions that have instituted things such as food pantries. UChicago has a voucher program, but I was just in a work group today where, from the perspective of being the facilities that is supposed to be the center of student life on campus, the Reynolds Club is kind of UChicago's student union. Figuring out how do we meet this need on campus, who do we partner with, what market research can be done to figure out how other schools are able to implement food pantries on campus, and how do they continuously fund those? How do they streamline donations? And how do they make it a resource that students in need actually want to use? I think a big barrier when it comes to getting help is getting past the stigma of being somebody who needs help. And students who deal with this problem are increasing on campus, but it's still a small number, enough that people may not want to be seen going into the food pantry, but like making it something that is easy to access and removing as many barriers as possible to get students access to the things that they need.
Wow, yeah, thank you so much. Of course, that's a major challenge, and right, likewise, these are the sorts of, these are the sorts of like major issues for, not academic success, but also just social well-being that comes with a career in higher ed. Absolutely, thank you for sharing. You've really helped, like, again, like kind of complexify this interesting show. Again, as Lauren said, that it just calls for multifaceted and multi-talented individuals and such thoughtful people as the three of you. So thank you again for sharing your perspectives and for being with us tonight. So let me move into the next phase of this, which is the networking part. Let me get this going. But what I will do is I will create a series of breakout rooms where your goal really is to turn strangers into advocates, but we're all friends here because we all have the University of Chicago in common. You may want to take a sort of data-driven approach to networking. Who are the sorts of individuals, the sorts of professionals that you want to expose yourself to meet, to introduce yourself to, and hear from. You can similarly use this time to diversify your circle. Fortunately, right, we have a breadth of alumni from across regions, industries, years, and so on, but all kind of circling around the education sector. This is also a great time to practice stating what it is that you're looking for in your work and what you're finding in it now. And then also just best practice, follow up now and later. Our house rules will be that you can join any breakout room at any time and leave whenever you need to. It's not rude to leave a room. You'll see I'll open up different rooms according to different topics relevant to pivoting into and out from education. Don't hesitate to return to the main session here if you need help navigating the technology or if you want to ask questions. Strategically use the chat to share your LinkedIn profile, any resource recommendations, or just generally contribute to conversation. Also, I will release the results of our poll so that you can see where your Zoom roommates stand. Let's see if we can, everyone share the results there. We have really a two-way tie. We have a tie between Jaime Escalante and John Keating, and then another tie between Vivian Banks and Minerva McGonigal with 29% other. And as we heard today, we have no shortage of other paradigm setting fictional teachers. So feel free to use that as a launching off point as well. What is it about them that has so spoken to you? Finally, let me resume my little slideshow to highlight some further opportunities to reinvest in yourself with alumni career programs. This Friday, we have our more casual networking and resource sharing virtual event called Coffee and Conversations. Our theme this week is working parents and caretakers across industries, across so on. For those of us in the alumni community who work beyond work, let's talk about how we handle that, how we navigate those challenges. Next week, you will have a Mind Your Career webinar called Resumes Tell, but Cover Letters Sell. So if you want to learn some skills from an expert on the cover letter as a genre, tune in for that. And then at the end of next month, we'll have another UChicago Networking Night celebrating alumni in athletics. Visit alumniandfriends.uchicago.edu for a full list of our upcoming virtual programs, as well as a link to subscribe to our newsletter, where we present resources and events for you to grow in your careers. And so with that, it is time to network. You'll click the breakout rooms button on your Zoom control panel. As I open them, click the first room you'd like to join and click join, and you'll be automatically brought into that separate Zoom room. And when you're ready for a change of scenery, navigate back to your breakout rooms button and select a new room, and clicking leave room will bring you back to this main session. If you need help, just feel free to use that function there, and we'll get you all set up. All right, without further ado, I will stop recording and we can get talking. Okay, breakout rooms are open. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight.